Council pushed too far now. Humans won't speak. HFY Story Part 1. The Breaking Point. The great council chamber of Zentari Prime fell silent as Ambassador Sarah Chen stood up from the human delegation table. Her face was calm, but those who knew humans well could see the storm brewing behind her dark eyes. "Ambassador Chen," called out Councillor Vextar, his 6 arms spreading wide in what his species considered a gesture of authority. "You cannot simply walk away from these proceedings. The Galactic Council demands an answer to our proposal." Sarah stopped at the chamber doors. The massive room held representatives from 47 different species, all watching this moment unfold. The air recycling systems hummed quietly, the only sound breaking the tension that had been building for months. "Councillor Vextar," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber, without any emotion. "The human delegation has heard your proposal. We have also heard the proposals from the previous 18 sessions. Our answer remains the same, but you must comply," shrieked the insect-like delegate from the Crick's hive mind. "The majority has voted. Human expansion must be controlled." Sarah turned around slowly. Behind her, the other 4 human ambassadors stood as well. They moved with the same careful, measured steps. No hurry, no panic, just a cold, calculated decision being made. "Must?" Sarah repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. "That's interesting. When the Zelnari wanted to strip mine the Kepler system and destroy 3 habitable worlds, we voted against it. The majority voted for it. Did they stop? No. When the Mortex Empire decided to enslave the entire Yindi species, we objected. The majority supported it. Did they listen to us? No." The chamber began to buzz with nervous energy. Various species started talking among themselves in their native languages. Translators worked overtime, creating a symphony of electronic voices. Those situations were different. Councillor Vextar's voice cracked slightly. "The economic benefits to the galaxy were what?" Sarah's voice cut through the noise like a laser through metal. "More important than the lives of billions. More important than entire civilizations. But now, when humans want to settle on empty worlds that nobody else has even looked at, suddenly the majority vote matters." The Crick's delegates' mandibles clicked rapidly. "Human expansion is aggressive, dangerous. You breed too fast. You adapt too quickly. You must be contained." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that predators wore when they finally decided to stop playing with their food. "Contained," she repeated, "like animals in a zoo." "Now see here," began the Altarian delegate, his blue skin shifting to a nervous purple color. "No one said anything about, didn't you?" Sarah pulled out a small device and projected a hologram into the center of the chamber. It showed the official council documents from the last 6 months. Motion 47B, establishing breeding controls for human populations. Motion 52A, limiting human colonial expansion to designated zones. Motion 58C, mandatory genetic modification to reduce human aggression levels. The hologram rotated slowly, showing page after page of proposals, each one aimed at limiting, controlling, or changing humanity in some fundamental way. "I see," Sarah continued. "So when you vote to destroy worlds, enslave species, and commit genocide, that's just politics. But when you vote to control every aspect of human existence, we should just smile and accept it, because it's the will of the majority." Ambassador Robert Kim, the military liaison, stepped forward. His dress uniform was covered in medals from conflicts most species in this room had chosen to ignore. "For 50 years we've fought your wars. We've died for worlds that weren't even ours. We've bled for principles that apparently only apply when it's convenient." "And how have you repaid us?" asked Ambassador Lisa Wong, the trade representative. "By trying to limit our colonies to worlds you consider worthless. By attempting to control our population. By treating us like a problem to be managed rather than an ally to be respected." The Councillor Vextar's skin shifted from its normal green to an angry red. "You are being dramatic. These measures are for the good of the galaxy." "Who's good?" Sarah asked. "The Zelnari who want our mining technology but not our competition. The Mortex who want our military support but fear our principles. The Cricks who want our protection but hate our independence. She began walking toward the center of the chamber, each step echoing in the sudden silence. For 5 decades, we've compromised. We've negotiated. We've tried to work within your system. We've followed rules that change every time we get too successful. We've accepted insults, restrictions, and outright discrimination because we believed in the idea of a galactic community. Sarah reached the center podium where the council speaker usually stood. Instead of the alien who normally occupied this space, a human now commanded the attention of the entire galaxy. But we've finally learned something important, she continued. This isn't a community. It's not even a fair system. It's a club for the old powers, and humans are just the hired help. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded order, others made threats, and a few even suggested that Sarah was committing treason against the Galactic Order. Sarah waited. She stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, watching as the greatest governing body in known space devolved into a shouting match. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. "So here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice carrying a new tone. Not angry, not sad, just final. The human delegation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We're also withdrawing from all Council-sponsored military operations, trade agreements, and research partnerships. The silence that followed was so complete that the air recycling system seemed loud. "You can't," gasped the Altarian delegate. "You're bound by treaty, by law, by precedent." Sarah looked around the chamber one final time. "Laws, treaties, like the ones that were supposed to protect the Yindi. Like the precedents that should have saved those 3 worlds in the Kepler system. You've taught us that your laws only apply when they benefit you." She turned toward the door, followed by her fellow ambassadors. "But you need us," called out the Mortex representative. "The Shadrach incursion. The border wars. Without human forces, you'll have to solve your own problems," Sarah said without turning around. "Good luck with that." As the human delegation reached the chamber doors, Councillor Vextar made one last desperate attempt. "Ambassador Chen, if you walk out that door, there will be consequences. The Council has ways of dealing with rebellious species." Sarah stopped. For a moment, every being in the chamber thought she might reconsider. Then she looked back over her shoulder. "Councillor Vexitar," she said quietly, "that sounds like a threat." "It's a promise," he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. Sarah nodded slowly. "Then I guess we'll see which one of us keeps their word." The doors sealed behind the human delegation with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate what they had just unleashed. In the silence that followed, a few of the wiser delegates began to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. Humans, after all, had a reputation for keeping their promises, even the ones that sounded like threats. The silence begins. 3 weeks after the human delegation walked out of the Galactic Council, the first signs of what was to come began appearing across known space. Captain Torvash of the Zelnari mining vessel Prophet's Edge stared at his communication console in confusion. For the 3rd day in a row, his distress calls had gone unanswered. His ship was stranded in the asteroid belt of the Proxima system, engines dead, life support failing, and his crew of 43 was getting more desperate by the hour. "Try the emergency frequency again," he ordered his communications officer. "Sir, I've tried 17 times. The human rescue ships aren't responding." "That's impossible," Torvash said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "The Terran Search and Rescue Service has never ignored a distress call. It's their whole purpose." His first officer, a nervous young Zelnari named Kexmi, approached with a data pad. "Captain, I've been monitoring the communication networks. There are distress calls going unanswered all across this sector. All human response teams have gone completely silent." Torvash felt his stomach sink. The humans had the best rescue ships in the galaxy. Their teams could reach stranded vessels in half the time it took anyone else, and they never asked questions about species, politics, or ability to pay. They just showed up and saved lives. "What about the Council emergency services?" "Council ships are available, sir, but the nearest one is 4 days away. We'll be dead from oxygen depletion in 6 hours." Meanwhile, in the Helix Nebula, Admiral Zethkri of the Mortex Empire faced a much larger problem. His fleet of 47 warships was engaged in a desperate battle with Shadrach raiders, and they were losing badly. "Where are the human reinforcements?" he barked at his communications officer. "Sir, we've sent 17 requests for assistance. The human vessels in this sector have not responded to any of them." On the main view screen, another Mortex destroyer exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. The Shadrach ships moved through space like schools of deadly fish, their technology far superior to anything the Mortex had. "Signal the Terran victory," Admiral Zethkri ordered. "Tell them we're invoking Article 12 of the Mutual Defense Treaty." "Sir," came the reply a few minutes later, "the human ships acknowledge our signal. They say they're no longer bound by Council treaties." Admiral Zethkri stared at the tactical display. Without human support, his fleet would be slaughtered. Human ships had shields that could absorb Shadrach energy weapons, and their kinetic cannons could punch through Shadrach armor like it was paper. "His own vessels might as well be throwing rocks. Tell them we'll pay whatever they want." "Sir, they're not responding to any further communication attempts." As if to emphasize the point, Admiral Zethkri watched a full squadron of human ships jump to faster-than-light speed, leaving the battlefield behind. They moved with the casual indifference of beings who had simply decided that someone else's war was no longer their problem. Back on Zentari Prime, Councillor Vextar paced in his private chambers, all 6 arms gesturing wildly as he spoke into his communication device. "What do you mean they won't answer?" he demanded. "We're offering them double the standard rate for medical supplies." The voice on the other end belonged to Administrator Plex of the Crix Hive Mind. "Counselor, the human medical ships acknowledge our signals, but they don't respond. They just ignore us. The plague on Crix 7 is spreading. We need those human antibiotics and treatment protocols. Our own medicine isn't working." Vextar's skin shifted to an angry purple. "This is ridiculous. Humans are traders. They live for profit. Offer them triple rates." "We tried that, Counselor. We tried offering them 10 times the standard rate. They don't even respond to the communications. It's like we don't exist to them anymore." Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Human mining operations that had been providing rare minerals simply stopped deliveries without explanation. Human research stations that had been sharing scientific discoveries went dark. Human trade vessels that had been carrying goods between alien worlds diverted to human colonies and never returned. Most disturbing of all, human entertainment broadcasts, the music, movies, and art that had become popular across dozens of species, simply ended. No explanation, no final episodes, no farewell messages, just silence. Dr. Yilandra of the Altarian Science Council stood in her laboratory, staring at a half-completed experiment. She had been working with human scientists for 3 years on a project to cure the genetic disease that was slowly killing her species. The humans had provided crucial insights into gene therapy that Altarian science had never considered. Now, her human colleagues simply didn't respond to her. "Messages, computer," she said to her lab's artificial intelligence. "Display the last communication from Dr. Martinez." The hologram showed a human woman with kind eyes and graying hair. Dr. Elena Martinez had been Dr. Yilandra's closest collaborator, and she had thought her friend. "Yilandra," the recorded message played. "I want you to know that our work together has been the highlight of my career. You've taught me so much about genetic structures that I never could have learned from human science alone. I hope someday we can continue our research. But right now, I can't in good conscience provide assistance to a species whose government votes to control human reproduction while their own people die from preventable diseases. I'm sorry, truly sorry. Maybe someday things will be different." The message ended there. Dr. Yilandra had sent 47 replies. None had received responses. In the military headquarters of the Galactic Council, General Korthak studied the strategic display with growing alarm. The situation was worse than anyone had imagined. "Show me the status of Operation Starshield," he ordered. His aide, a young Zelnari officer, manipulated the controls. The display showed the outer rim of the galaxy. where Council forces had been holding the line against an invasion of hostile aliens from outside known space. Sir, without human ships, we've lost 12 star systems in the past 2 weeks. The human vessels assigned to the operation have withdrawn to defensive positions around human colonies. They're not participating in offensive operations. What about the defensive pact? Humans signed treaties? Sir, according to our legal department, when humans withdrew from the Council, all Council-based treaties became void. The individual species treaties are complicated. General Korthak studied the display more carefully. The situation was becoming critical. Human ships had formed an interesting pattern across the galaxy. They were still protecting trade routes, but only the ones that benefited human worlds. They were still responding to emergencies, but only ones that affected human civilians or human allies, and they had some surprising allies. Sir, his aide continued, we're also seeing some unusual developments. The Yindi, the species the Mortex enslaved, they've declared independence and are apparently receiving human support. Several small species that the Council had overlooked are also reporting human assistance. Elaborate. The Farani, sir. The Council voted to allow the Crix to absorb their homeworld 5 years ago. Apparently, humans evacuated the entire population to a new world in human space. Same with the survivors from those 3 planets in the Kepler system that the Zelnari destroyed. General Korthak felt a chill run down his spine. Are you telling me that humans have been secretly building an alliance with species the Council abandoned? It appears so, sir. And more species are joining them. The Tauri announced yesterday that they're withdrawing from the Council to join what they're calling the Human Alliance. The Delrani and the Vexkari have made similar announcements. The general studied the strategic display again, but now he saw it with new eyes. The human withdrawal wasn't just about hurt feelings or political disagreements. It was a calculated move by a species that had been planning this for a long time, and they weren't alone. In her apartment on Centauri Prime, former Ambassador Sarah Chen sat by her window, watching the ships come and go from the spaceport. She was no longer an ambassador. That position had ended when humanity withdrew from the Council. Now she was simply a private citizen, waiting for transport back to human space. Her personal communicator chimed. She glanced at the message and smiled for the first time in weeks. It was from Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Fleet. Phase 1 complete. All human assets withdrawn from Council space as planned. Phase 2 initiated. The packages have been delivered to our new allies. How are things on your end? Sarah typed back. Council is starting to panic. 3 more species announced withdrawal today. The Altarians are asking for emergency medical aid. The Mortex lost another fleet to the Shadrach. And the Zelnari are discovering how hard it is to run a mining operation without human engines. Perfect. Any regrets? Sarah looked out the window again. A Crix transport was trying to dock at the emergency medical bay, probably carrying plague victims who needed human medicine. She felt a brief pang of sympathy. The Crix civilians hadn't voted to treat humans like animals. But then she remembered the Crix delegates' words. You breed too fast. You adapt too quickly. You must be contained. No regrets, she typed back. They wanted to treat us like animals in a zoo. Now they can see what the galaxy looks like without us. Her communicator chimed again with a different message. This one was from Dr. Martinez, the geneticist who had been working with the Altarians. Sarah, I got your message about the Altarian plague. I know you said no exceptions, but these are innocent people. And Dr. Yolandra really is a friend. Sarah considered this carefully. The plan had been to maintain complete radio silence with all Council species. No aid, no trade, no communication. It was harsh, but it was making the point that humanity was not going to be taken for granted anymore. But the plan had also included provisions for humanitarian exceptions. Make the delivery, she typed back. But make sure Dr. Yolandra understands it's not coming from the Council treaties or agreements. It's coming from personal friendship, and make sure she knows that friendship is a two-way street. As Sarah prepared for sleep, she wondered how long it would take for the Council to truly understand what they had lost. Humans weren't just soldiers and traders and scientists. They were the species that other species had come to rely on for solutions to problems everyone else had given up on. Soon, those problems would start piling up, and for the first time in galactic history, there would be no humans coming to fix them. The galaxy breaks down. 2 months after the Great Silence began, the galaxy was falling apart. Commander Lix-Ara of the Galactic Council Emergency Fleet stared at her mission board in disbelief. In front of her were 1,247 active distress calls from across known space. Her fleet could handle maybe 30 at a time, and they were already stretched beyond their limits. "Commander," called her communications officer, "we're receiving another priority distress call from the Helix Nebula. It's Admiral Zethkri again. What's his status?" "Down to 11 ships, ma'am. The Shadrach have taken 4 more systems. He's requesting immediate evacuation support for 3 billion civilians." Commander Lix-Ara looked at her tactical display. The nearest evacuation ships were 2 weeks away, and they could only carry maybe 50,000 people per trip. The math was simple and brutal. And the human ships in that sector? "Still present, ma'am. 17 vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers and a hospital ship. They're holding position around the Human Research Station on Kepler 442b. Have they responded to our requests for assistance?" "No, ma'am. They acknowledge our signals, but provide no response." Lix-Ara had been in the Galactic Fleet for 30 years. She had seen wars, plagues, natural disasters, and every kind of emergency the universe could throw at civilization. In every single case, the humans had been there. Sometimes they arrived even before the official distress calls went out, like they had some kind of supernatural ability to know where they were needed. Now, for the first time in her career, she was facing emergencies that simply could not be solved. "Ma'am," her tactical officer interrupted, "we're also receiving reports from the Zelnari merchant fleet. Another mining colony has gone dark. That's the 15th one this month, 'cause equipment failure, ma'am. The mining machines use human-designed fusion reactors. Without human technicians to maintain them, they're shutting down one by one." Lix-Ara rubbed her temples with her primary hands. The Zelnari controlled 60% of the rare mineral mining in the galaxy. Those minerals were essential for everything from starship engines to medical equipment. If the mines kept failing, "Ma'am, incoming priority message from Counselor Vextar." The main screen activated, showing the familiar green-skinned form of the senior counselor. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Commander Lix-Ara, what's the status of Operation Reconnect?" "Sir, I've sent formal diplomatic requests to human governments on 47 worlds. So far, 32 have responded." "Excellent. What did they say?" "They said no, sir." Vextar's skin shifted to that angry red color. "All of them?" "All of them, sir. Most were polite about it. The response from Terra itself was particularly thorough. Show me." Lix-Ara activated another screen, displaying the official response from the Terran government. It was signed by President Maria Santos herself. "To the Galactic Council, we acknowledge your request for emergency aid and resumption of diplomatic relations. We regret that we must decline. As you correctly noted during our final council session, the majority vote is the supreme authority in galactic governance. The majority voted to control human reproduction, limit human expansion, and modify human genetics. Since we are no longer part of your council, we are no longer bound to ignore the majority's will. We respect your sovereignty completely. We suggest you solve your current problems the same way you solve the problems of the Yindi, the Farani, and the inhabitants of the Kepler worlds through majority vote. Respectfully, the Terran Republic." Counselor Vextar stared at the message in silence for a long moment. "They're being sarcastic," he said finally. "Yes, sir. I believe that's what humans call throwing shade." Meanwhile, in the outer rim systems, the situation was becoming desperate. Dr. Plexandra of the Crix hive mind stood in what had once been a thriving medical research facility. Now it looked like a morgue. "How many today?" she asked her assistant. 47,000 deaths on the homeworld alone, Doctor. The plague has spread to 6 more colony worlds. Our projections show total population collapse within 8 months. Dr. Plexandra stared at the empty storage units that had once held human-manufactured medicines. The Crix had always been proud of their scientific achievements, but they had never needed to develop certain types of medicine. Humans had been so willing to trade medical supplies that it had seemed unnecessary to duplicate their research. Now, it was becoming clear how dependent they had become. What about our emergency protocols? Doctor, our emergency protocols all assume human medical support. We don't actually have the equipment to manufacture the antibiotics we need. The synthesis techniques require technology that only humans and 2 other species possess. Which 2 species? The Yindi and the Farani, Doctor. Dr. Plexandra felt what humans might have called irony if the Cricks had understood that emotion. The 2 species the Council had abandoned were now part of the human alliance, and they were the only ones who might have been able to help. Have we tried contacting them directly? Yes, Doctor. The Yindi sent a very interesting response. The assistant activated a holographic display showing a Yindi leader Dr. Plexandra didn't recognize. The Yindi looked different somehow, healthier, more confident than the enslaved beings she remembered from council meetings. To the Crick's hive mind, the hologram spoke. We have received your request for medical assistance. We remember our time under Mortek's rule, when our people died from preventable diseases while the council debated trade regulations. We remember when your delegate voted to support our continued enslavement because it was economically beneficial to galactic stability. We have discussed your request with our human allies. They have reminded us that every species has the right to solve their own problems. We wish you success in your endeavors. Respectfully, the Free Yindi Republic. Dr. Plexandra realized she was seeing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that the Council had abandoned was now in a position to save them, and had chosen not to. Back on Centauri Prime, the Council chamber that had once hosted representatives from 47 species now held only 26. In 2 months, 21 species had withdrawn to join the Human Alliance. Councillor Vextar stood at the central podium, addressing a chamber that looked more empty than full. Fellow councillors, he began, we face an unprecedented crisis. The human withdrawal has created cascading failures across our entire galactic infrastructure. It's sabotage, declared the Mortek's representative. They planned this. They deliberately made us dependent on their technology and then abandoned us. Actually, said a new voice from the back of the chamber, I don't think they did. Everyone turned to look. The speaker was Councillor Ithara of the Delrani Republic, one of the few species that had not yet withdrawn from the Council. Elaborate, Vextar demanded. Councillor. Ithara activated a holographic display showing galactic trade and aid statistics for the past 50 years. Look at the patterns, she said. Human aid increases during every crisis. Human trade agreements favor the receiving species. Human military support asks for nothing in return. Human research is shared freely with anyone who wants it. She highlighted specific data points on the display. When the Altarians faced the genetic plague, humans could have demanded exclusive mining rights to Altarian crystal deposits. Instead, they asked for nothing. When the Zelnari homeworld was hit by solar flares, humans could have demanded territory concessions. Instead, they evacuated 4 billion people for free. What's your point? Asked the Crick's representative. My point is that humans never made us dependent on them. We chose to become dependent on them because they were better at solving problems than we were. They were more generous with aid than we were. They were more reliable in emergencies than we were. The chamber fell silent. And now that they're gone, Ithara continued, we're discovering that we forgot how to solve our own problems. Councillor Vextar's skin had shifted to a pale green. Are you suggesting we surrender to human demands? What demands? Ithara asked. They haven't made any. They haven't asked us to change our laws or our policies. They haven't threatened us or tried to conquer us. They just left. She manipulated the display to show current human activities across the galaxy. Look what they're doing now. They're still conducting search and rescue operations for their allies. They're still fighting the Shadrach to protect their colonies. They're still conducting medical research to help species that supported them. They're still mining asteroids and trading goods with each other and their allies. But not with us, the Altarian representative said quietly. No, Ithara agreed. Not with us. We spent 50 years taking their help for granted, then voted to control their reproduction and limit their expansion. Now they're treating us exactly the way we said we wanted to be treated, as completely separate entities with no obligations to each other. The Mortex representative slammed his fist on his desk. This is intolerable. We are the Galactic Council. We represent the legitimate government of known space. Do we? Ithara asked. 21 species have withdrawn in 2 months. 3 more submitted withdrawal papers yesterday. At what point do we stop being the galactic government and start being just another political alliance? Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency lights activated, and the main display showed an urgent message from the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Council emergency session, came the voice of Admiral Korthak. The Shadrach have broken through the Helix defense line. They're moving toward the core systems. Estimated time to reach Zentari Prime, 6 weeks. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives demanded to know why the defenses had failed, what the casualty reports were, and what was being done to stop the invasion. But Councillor Ithara was looking at a different display, one showing the positions of human ships throughout the galaxy. The humans had 47 vessels within 3 days' travel of the breakthrough point, more than enough to stop the Shadrach advance. Those ships hadn't moved. As the council chamber descended into chaos, one thought occurred to her. For the first time in galactic history, the cavalry wasn't coming, because the council had voted to get rid of the cavalry. The price of arrogance, 3.5 months after the Great Silence began, Councillor Vextar sat alone in his private chambers, staring at a communication device he had been afraid to activate for weeks. The Shadrach invasion fleet was now only 2 weeks away from Zentari Prime. The Outer Rim had fallen completely. 14 billion refugees were flooding toward the core worlds, and there was nowhere near enough space or resources to handle them. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the report sitting on his desk from the intelligence division. The humans had been monitoring every Shadrach movement, every battle, every strategic decision. Their ships had been in perfect position to intercept and destroy the invasion fleet at least 6 different times. They had chosen not to. "Sir," came his aide's voice through the intercom, "the emergency council session is about to begin." Vextar activated the communication device and walked toward the council chamber. When he arrived, he found only 12 councillors present. The chamber that had once held 47 species now looked like a small meeting room. "Fellow councillors," Vextar began, his voice lacking its usual authority. "We have received a message from the Human Alliance." A hologram activated in the center of the chamber. Instead of Ambassador Sarah Chen, a new face appeared, President Maria Santos of the Terran Republic. Behind her stood representatives of 34 species, including many the Council had abandoned over the years. "To the Galactic Council," President Santos began, "we have been monitoring your current difficulties with great interest. We understand that the Shadrach invasion has created significant challenges for your remaining member species." "Get to the point," muttered the Mortex representative. "President," Santos continued as if she had heard him, "we also understand that your current military assets are insufficient to repel this invasion. Our intelligence indicates that without immediate assistance, Zentari Prime and the remaining core worlds will fall within 2 weeks. Vextar felt his heart sinking. This was going to be a demand for surrender, or maybe a list of impossible conditions for aid. Therefore, President Santos said, "The Human Alliance would like to extend an offer of assistance." The chamber erupted in surprised voices. This was not what anyone had expected. However, the president continued, and the chamber fell silent again. "This assistance comes with certain requirements." "Here it comes," whispered the Altarian representative. "First," President Santos said, "any species that accepts Human Alliance military aid must formally withdraw from the Galactic Council and apply for membership in our alliance." "Impossible," shouted the Krix delegate. "The Council has existed for 800 years. President Santos smiled, and it reminded everyone uncomfortably of Ambassador Chen's predator smile months ago. "Second, all former Council species must undergo what we call integration assessment." This includes a full review of your policies regarding other species, your military activities, and your trade practices. You want to control our governments, Vextar accused. Third, the president continued, ignoring the interruption. Any species found to have engaged in what humans consider crimes against sapience will be required to make reparations to their victims before full alliance membership is granted. The chamber was now completely silent. Fourth, all alliance members must agree to binding arbitration for disputes, with humans holding veto power over any decision that affects non-alliance species. Councillor Ithara of the Delrani was the first to speak. President Santos, what you're describing isn't an alliance. It's conquest. President Santos nodded. Yes, it is. Just like what the Council did to the Yindi, the Farani, and dozens of other species over the past century. The only difference is that we're being honest about it. This is outrageous. Vextar's skin had turned almost black with rage. You can't simply take over the galaxy. Can't we? President Santos gestured to someone off-camera. The hologram expanded to show a tactical display of the entire galaxy. Human alliance ships were everywhere, not just around human worlds, but positioned at strategic points throughout known space. Supply lines, communication relays, trade routes, everywhere that mattered, there were human ships waiting. We've been preparing for this moment for 30 years, President Santos said calmly. Ever since the Council voted to allow the enslavement of the Yindi, we knew this day would come. Every time you ignored genocide, every time you profited from slavery, every time you voted to control us instead of working with us, we took notes. The tactical display showed more detail. Human research stations were positioned near every major species' homeworld. Human mining operations controlled access to critical resources. Human trade routes had been gradually shifting to exclude Council worlds. You see, Councillor Vextar, you made a fundamental mistake about humans. You thought we were just like you, that we acted purely from self-interest, that we could be controlled through political manipulation, that our principles were just convenient lies we told ourselves. President Santos moved closer to the camera. But our principles are real. When we said we believed in justice, we meant it. When we said we believed in freedom, we meant it. When we said we would not tolerate genocide, we meant that too. So what's your alternative? Ithara asked quietly. President Santos looked directly at her. The alternative is what's happening right now. The Shadrach destroy your remaining worlds. Your people die or become refugees. And the galaxy learns what happens when the only species willing to fight for justice decides to stop caring about everyone else. She gestured to the tactical display again. Or you can join us. Accept our terms, submit to our authority, and live under a system that actually protects the weak instead of exploiting them. That's not a choice, Vextar protested. That's an ultimatum. Yes, President Santos agreed. Just like the ultimatum you gave us about controlling our reproduction. Just like the ultimatum you gave the Yindi about accepting slavery. Just like the ultimatum you gave those 3 worlds about being strip-mined for profit. She paused, letting that sink in. The only difference is that our ultimatum includes the option to survive with dignity. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. The main display showed an urgent message from the defense fleet. Council emergency alert, came Admiral Korthak's panicked voice. The Shadrach have accelerated their approach. New intelligence suggests they're not just invading. They're planning to glass every inhabited world in the core systems. Estimated time to Zentari Prime, 4 days. The chamber fell into stunned silence. President Santos spoke into that silence. 4 days to decide. After that, our offer expires, and you can face the Shadrach alone. The hologram deactivated, leaving the 12 remaining councillors staring at each other across a nearly empty chamber. We have to accept, Ithara said finally. It's the only way to save our people. Never, Vextar declared. I won't bow to human arrogance. Arrogance. The voice came from the chamber entrance. Everyone turned to see a familiar figure walking through the doors. Ambassador Sarah Chen had returned. She looked older, more tired than when she had left months ago. But her eyes held the same cold determination that had marked her departure. You want to talk about arrogance? she asked, walking toward the center of the chamber. Let me tell you about arrogance, Counselor Vextar. She activated her own holographic display, showing historical records from the past century. Arrogance is voting to enslave an entire species because it's economically convenient. Arrogance is destroying inhabited worlds for mining profits. Arrogance is telling the most militarily powerful species in the galaxy that they breed too fast and need to be controlled. The display showed image after image of council decisions that had resulted in death and suffering. But you know what the real arrogance was? Sarah asked, assuming we would just accept it forever. She turned to face Vextar directly. Did you really think we hadn't noticed the pattern? Every time humans became successful at something, the council voted to limit us. Every time we tried to help other species, you found ways to profit from their misery. Every time we built something good, you tried to control it. We were maintaining galactic stability. Vextar protested. No, Sarah said quietly. You were maintaining your own power, and you assumed humans were too stupid or too naive to figure it out. She walked to the central podium where she had made her historic speech months ago. So we did something you never expected. We planned ahead. For 30 years, we prepared for the day when you would finally push us too far. We built alliances with the species you abandoned. We developed technologies you couldn't steal or control. We positioned ourselves to survive without you. The holographic display shifted to show the current state of the galaxy. And when that day came, we didn't fight you. We didn't conquer you. We didn't even threaten you. We just left. Sarah smiled that predator smile again. Of course, we knew you'd eventually need us. Bullies always need someone to do the actual work while they take credit for it. So we waited. We watched. We let you discover what the galaxy looks like when humans stop fixing everyone else's problems. Counselor Ithara stood up slowly. Ambassador Chen, if I may ask, was all of this planned? The withdrawal, the silence, even the Shadrach invasion? Sarah considered the question carefully. We didn't plan the Shadrach invasion, but we knew something like it would happen eventually. The galaxy has always been full of threats, and the Council has always depended on humans to handle them. She looked around the nearly empty chamber. What we planned was to stop being the galaxy's unpaid janitors. We decided that if you wanted to treat us like hired help, you could start paying us like hired help. And if you wanted to control us, you could try doing it without our cooperation. And now? Vextar asked. Now you have a choice, Sarah replied. Join our alliance, accept our authority, and live under a system that actually works. Or maintain your independence and handle your own problems. She started walking toward the door, then stopped and looked back. But choose quickly. The Shadrach don't particularly care about political philosophy. They just want to turn your worlds into slag. As she reached the door, Ithara called out, Ambassador, what guarantee do we have that humans won't become exactly what the Council was? What's to stop you from becoming the same kind of tyrant? Sarah paused at the doorway. Nothing, she said honestly. Power corrupts and humans aren't immune to that. Maybe in 100 years, human leadership will be just as arrogant and short-sighted as the Council became. She looked back over her shoulder. But here's the difference, Counselor Ithara. When that day comes, there will be other species in our alliance with the power to check us. Species we saved, species we elevated, species we treated as equals instead of subjects. And they'll remember what happens when the powerful become too comfortable. The door sealed behind her, leaving the 12 counselors alone with their impossible choice. In the silence that followed, the sound of alarms from the defense fleet seemed very far away. The new galaxy 1 year later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Human Alliance headquarters, watching ships from 47 different species dock at the massive space station orbiting Kepler 442b. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Yindi crystalline structures provided the framework, human technology powered the life support systems. Farani artists had designed the living spaces, and Delrani engineers had created the most efficient docking system in galactic history. It was everything the old Galactic Council could have been, if they had actually cared about cooperation instead of control. The integration assessment of the former Mortex worlds is complete, reported Admiral Elena Vasquez, approaching with a datapad. The results are Interesting. Sarah accepted the report and began reading. After the Shadrach crisis, 18 of the former council species had accepted human terms and joined the alliance. The integration process had been revealing, to say the least. The Mortex leadership genuinely believed they were bringing order to the galaxy, Sarah mused, reading through the psychological evaluations. They enslaved the Yindi not out of malice, but because they honestly thought slavery was more efficient than freedom. Does that make it better or worse? Elena asked. I'm not sure. Evil you can fight. Stupidity is harder to fix, Sarah continued reading. The Mortex integration had included mandatory education programs about sapient rights, economic reparations to the Yindi, and a complete restructuring of their government. It was working, slowly, but the process had taken months of careful negotiation. What about the Zelnari mining operations? Fully converted to automated systems with human oversight. Productivity is up 340%, workplace fatalities are down to 0, and the Zelnari workers are actually making more money than they ever did under the old system. Sarah smiled. The Zelnari had been perhaps the biggest surprise. Once they understood that humans weren't trying to steal their mining rights, but actually improve their operations, they had embraced the alliance with enthusiasm that bordered on worship. And the Crick's medical crisis? Resolved. Dr. Martinez's team developed a treatment protocol that's now being used across 14 systems. The Cricks have also agreed to share their hive mind communication technology with Alliance medical teams. That had been more complicated. The plague that had been killing the Cricks turned out to be caused by their own genetic modifications. Attempts to increase their efficiency had compromised their immune systems. Human medical intervention had saved them, but it had required admitting that their entire approach to biological enhancement was fundamentally flawed. Any word from the remaining council worlds? Elena's expression grew somber. Zentari Prime fell 3 weeks ago. The Shadrach are using it as a forward base for attacks on the inner systems. Council of Extar and the remaining leadership fled to the outer colonies. Sarah felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy. Vextar had refused the alliance terms, even as Shadrach ships appeared in his system's sensor range. His final message had been typically defiant. The Galactic Council will never bow to human tyranny. Now Zentari Prime was a radioactive wasteland, and the Galactic Council consisted of 4 species hiding in remote systems. Too proud to ask for help and too weak to help themselves. Have they requested aid? No. They're still sending messages demanding that we recognize their authority and provide assistance as per the legitimate galactic government. Sarah walked to the viewing port and looked out at the busy docking bays. A Yindi cultural exchange ship was docking next to a human research vessel. A Farani art transport was being escorted by Delrani security ships. 3 former Mortex colonies had sent a joint diplomatic mission to discuss infrastructure improvements. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, still cultural misunderstandings, still the occasional species that thought they could game the system, but it was working in ways the old council never had. Sarah, Eleanor said quietly, do you ever regret it? The way we handled the transition? Sarah considered the question. Billions had died during the Shadrach invasion of council space. Entire civilizations had been destroyed because of political pride and institutional arrogance. The survivors were refugees, dependent on Alliance charity for their basic survival. Ask me about regret when the Altarian plague gets cured next month, she said finally. Ask me about regret when the Yindi finish building their first starship in 3 centuries. Ask me about regret when the Farani art galleries open on 50 different worlds. She turned back to Eleanor. The old council had 800 years to learn how to treat people decently. They spent that time perfecting the art of exploitation. Should I regret that they finally faced consequences for their choices? Before Eleanor could answer, both women's communicators chimed with an urgent message. Sarah glanced at hers and felt her blood run cold. What is it? Elena asked. Long-range sensors have detected a new threat coming from outside the galaxy. Something bigger than the Shadrach. Much bigger. They looked at each other for a moment. Then Sarah smiled grimly. I guess we're about to find out if our new alliance is as strong as we think it is. As if summoned by her words, her communicator chimed again with incoming messages from across Alliance space. Species after species volunteering ships, resources, and personnel to face this new threat. Not because they were ordered to, not because of treaties or political obligations, but because they genuinely wanted to protect what they had built together. The Yindi offered their crystal technology for advanced shields. The Farani volunteered to design camouflage systems that would hide entire fleets. The former Mortex colonies pledged their industrial capacity to ship construction. Even the newest alliance members, species that had joined only weeks ago, were asking how they could help. Sarah looked out at the docking bays again, but now she saw something different. Not just ships from different species, but the foundation of something genuinely new. A galactic civilization built on cooperation instead of domination, on mutual respect instead of fear. It had taken the complete collapse of the old order to make it possible. It had taken the humans walking away from everything they had built to force everyone else to examine what they had taken for granted. But it had worked. "You know," Elena said, reading over the volunteer messages, "I don't think the old council would have gotten this kind of response to a crisis." "Of course not," Sarah replied. "They would have voted to form a committee to study the problem, then argued for 6 months about who should pay for the solution." Her communicator chimed one final time. This message was different. It was from one of the refugee camps housing survivors from the Council worlds, a group of Zentari scientists who had escaped the destruction of their homeworld. "To the Human Alliance leadership," the message read, "We know we have no right to ask for anything. Our government rejected your offer of protection, and we suffered the consequences of that choice. But we are not our government. We are simply people who want to help protect our new home. We offer our expertise in quantum engineering to assist with the new threat. We ask for nothing in return except the chance to prove that not all former council citizens are too proud to learn." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at Elena. "Send them a response. Tell them their offer is accepted and welcome them to the Alliance." Just like that. Just like that. The whole point of this was never revenge, Elena. It was justice. And justice includes the possibility of redemption. She looked out at the galaxy one more time. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, a new threat was approaching. But for the first time in galactic history, it would be met by truly united species fighting for principles they all believed in. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Human Alliance had begun, and this time, they were going to do it right. Epilogue. 10 years later, former Councillor Ithara, now serving as the Alliance Ambassador for Refugee Integration, stood in the memorial garden on New Zentari, the world that had been built for survivors of the Council collapse. The garden contained 47 stone pillars, one for each species that had once belonged to the Galactic Council. Some pillars bore the names of extinct species, civilizations that had been lost to the Shadrach invasion or had chosen destruction over surrender to human tyranny. Other pillars told different stories. The Delrani pillar listed their contributions to Alliance engineering projects. The reformed Mortex pillar honored their efforts to make reparations for past injustices. The Altarian pillar celebrated their breakthrough in genetic medicine that had saved billions of lives across the galaxy. At the center of the garden stood a simple human monument with words carved in dozens of languages. "We tried to warn you." Ithara often came here to think. Today she was joined by an unexpected visitor, former Councillor Vextar, now an elderly figure who worked in the Refugee Assistance Program. "Any regrets?" she asked him, the same question that had haunted them all for a decade. Vextar was quiet for a long time, looking at the memorial pillars. "I regret that we were too arrogant to listen," he said finally. "I regret that billions died because we couldn't admit we were wrong. I regret that it took the complete destruction of our civilization to teach us what the humans had been, trying to tell us all along." He gestured to the thriving city, visible through the garden walls, "but I don't regret the result. This alliance, this galaxy we're building now, it's everything the Council should have been. And the humans..." He paused, struggling with words. "The humans could have made us into slaves or vassals. Instead, they made us into partners." Ithara nodded. "The integration process had been difficult, sometimes humiliating, but it had been fair. Former council species weren't punished for their government's mistakes. They were educated, assisted, and gradually brought into full alliance membership as they proved their commitment to the new way of doing things. "Do you think they planned it this way from the beginning?" she asked. "All of it? The withdrawal, the silence, even giving us the chance to choose destruction over surrender?" Vextar considered this. "I think they planned to be ready for whatever we chose, but I also think they hoped we'd choose better than we did." As they walked through the garden, they passed a group of young beings from a dozen different species, all working together on a joint research project. It was a common sight now. The Alliance encouraged mixed species collaboration in everything from art to science to exploration. The humans kept their promise, Ithara observed. They said power corrupts, and that other species would need to check them when they became too comfortable. "Look around, we're doing exactly that. Humans still lead the Alliance, but they don't control it." It was true. The Human Alliance had evolved into something closer to a true democracy than the galaxy had ever seen. Humans held key leadership positions and maintained veto power over major decisions, but day-to-day governance involved representatives from every member species. More importantly, the humans had kept their promise to step back as other species became capable of leadership. Several Alliance sectors were now governed entirely by non-human species, with human involvement limited to advisory roles. "They broke the cycle," Vextar said quietly. "For the first time in galactic history, the dominant species voluntarily shared power instead of hoarding it." As they reached the garden's exit, Ithara's communicator chimed with a priority message. She read it quickly, then smiled. "Good news?" Vextar asked. "The best. The exploration fleet has made contact with the Andromedans, the species that was threatening us 10 years ago. Turns out they're not hostile, just refugees from their own galactic conflict. The Alliance Council has voted to offer them membership and assistance in rebuilding their civilization." Vextar shook his head in amazement. The old council would have seen them as a threat to be destroyed or a resource to be exploited. "But we're not the old council anymore," Ithara replied. "We learned something from the humans that we never understood before." "Which is?" She gestured to the memorial garden behind them, then to the thriving city beyond. "That the strongest civilizations aren't built on fear or domination. They're built on the simple idea that everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday." As they walked away from the memorial garden, the sun set over New Centauri, casting long shadows from the 47 pillars. But the shadows were growing shorter each year. As the galaxy moved further away from the darkness of its past and into the light of what the humans had always promised was possible. A future where justice wasn't just a word in treaties, but a lived reality for every sentient being in the galaxy. The Council had pushed the humans too far, and the humans had stopped talking. But in the silence that followed, the galaxy had finally learned how to listen. The end.